been invited as guest faculty at numerous national and state conferences since 2005. He has been chief instructor and co-instructor for international, national and state conferences since 2001. Dr. Satyajit Sinha is the moderator of today's PG program. Dr. Kunal Kishore did DO from RIMS Ranchi. He completed his DNB and fellowship in pediatric ophthalmology and strabismus from Arvind Eye Hospital. He is the director and consultant at Vision Eye Care and Laser Center, Patna. Dr. Kunal Kishore is the panelist of today's program. Dr. Love Kochgawa, a distinguished pediatric ophthalmologist, is an executive director and senior consultant ophthalmologist at BBI Foundation and is also the director of SLR Eye and Retina Surgeons. He did his fellowship in pediatric ophthalmology from Shankar Nethralaya, Orbis Pediatric Ophthalmology Training and Learning Center. He has received many prestigious awards and has several publications to his credit. He had been faculty, chief instructor and judge in various international and national conferences. He is the eminent trainer of today's PG program. Now may I request Dr. Satyajit Sinha to please take over the charge of today's webcast. Dr. Satyajit Sinha.
Thank you, Dr. Shashikant Sharma, for that kind introduction. Today we will be having the class on exotropias. We had yesterday on esotropias, and those who had requested, we have sent them the US YouTube link for the first 2 days. Those who want the YouTube link can write to me on the email and we'll send that. There were other requests which we have incorporated in these talks today and will be incorporating tomorrow also. Dr. Love has been very kind that after his talk today, he will be showing some videos also of surgical relevance to the postgraduates. We are very grateful to you, Dr. Love, for that. Tomorrow, after his class, there will be an additional paper on orthoptics and vision therapy, basics of vision therapy. That is in addition to the special kind of strabismus that he'll be speaking on tomorrow. So that will be a very, very fruitful thing for postgraduates. I'm very grateful to Dr. Kunal, who will be moderating the session along with me. And I'm very grateful, as always, to INTAS for bringing this program together. Dr. Love Kochgawe, please.
Thank you, Dr. Satyajit. So let us go to today's topic, and that is exotropia. So let us start with the types. See, the examination and evaluation we have already completed. One extra thing, one extra measurement that you need to take for exotropia is for the angles in lateral gazes also, because that will help in our assessment for surgery. So as all of you know, this is just for completion that a committant exotropia can be a constant one. The most common is the intermittent divergent squint, and secondary may be either a sensory or consecutive. What do you mean by consecutive? Anyone? Consecutive is like if you have operated and it leads to overcorrection. Incomitant is again paralytic. So there are mainly two basic patterns. One is divergent excess, another is convergent insufficiency. The exotropia can be either when the child is seeing at very distant objects, then the angle will be more. Then that is divergent excess. And similarly, convergence insufficiency is that when the child is seeing the near exotropia will be more than distance. That could be the convergence insufficiency type. And this is the most common intermittent divergent squint. Now, what will be the history here? History will be Like first few months nothing happened, then slowly someone noticed that eyes are deviating, but it's not there all the time. Then when you ask a leaded question that when does it see, the most common answer will be when the child gets up from sleep and when the child is tired. These are the most common situations in which intermittent divergent squint first appears. Why? When the child is sleeping, then there is no fusion. So when the child gets up immediately, there is this is noticed, the divergence, and then he or she can control the squint, and then it becomes orthophoric again. So how do we evaluate? One is detection of amblyopia. If it is amblyopic, it cannot be in intermittent divergent squint. If one eye is amblyopic, it cannot be intermittent divergent squint. It is a constant exotropia then. Because for intermittent divergent squint, for both eyes to fix together and bring it back to ortho position, the vision has to be equal in both eyes. The fusion has to be there. The stereopsis has to be there. Then only the child will be able to do it. Second will be detection of refractive error. Why refractive error? Again, first it is an essential part of pediatric eye examination. Second, with spectacles, the intermittent divergent squint can be controlled better. Without spectacles, with hazy vision, the fusion will get lost and the eyes will start deviating outward. So with spectacles, the control is better. So if there is refractive error, the spectacle use has to be constant. And assessing control is subjective and objective both, based on the history given by parents and what you notice in the clinic. How do we evaluate? Again, we have to take the measurement for distance, for near, and for very far distance. This is one important thing. Many times at 20 feet, the angle may be different, but if it is a divergent excess is exotropia, then what we do is that take the child out of the clinic, show them a distant outdoor target, and then do the measurements. That is again important, because if we miss this in divergent excess, many times the angle that will appear at 20 feet will be much less than the actual squint angle, and we may that may lead to undercorrection when we operate. That is one important thing in exotropia. Second is monocular patching, because they have such a strong fusion. So what we do many times, if the angle is not very reliable, we patch one of the eye for 45 minutes and then do the measurement again. Again, the idea being to break the fusion and see how much is the actual angle of the exotropia. And +3 lens is just for completion's sake, we don't do it. And lateral incompetence is when we take that we had discussed 2 days back, I think. When we do the lateral, we tell the child, we turn the face towards right and left, and then do the squint measurement in right gaze and left gaze. Then if it is more than 20%, if there is more than 20% difference between the primary gaze and lateral gaze measurements, then our surgical plan changes. If it is less than 20%, then surgical plan remains the same. How do we treat? Most important is optical, that is spectacle correction. Sometimes a small angle, we may give prisms if we are deferring the surgery, to maintain the fusion and stereopsis. And what kind of prism will we give in this? Base in prism is given, so that strain in the eye doesn't occur. Orthoptics again is exercises. All these are temporary measures till surgery. Alternate occlusion is for measurement proper, and Botox again it is of not of practical use much. If it is a myopia, we'll give full correction. Anisometropia has to be corrected. Hyperopia of this is again was discussed yesterday. So, there was a question that what do you mean by full correction? This is exactly what I was meaning. If it is a esotropia with hyperopia of +2, full correction has to be given. If there is ortho or exotropia, then we can reduce 1.5 or 2 from the full cycloplegic value in hyperopia. And if it is hyperopia more than 2 diopters, definitely it needs correction. And in presbyopic, we give the normal addition. Over minus we had discussed 2 days back. Again, practically we are not doing this. Sometimes we can try, but we are not doing this practically. Prisms, as discussed, it is for asthenopic symptoms. If the child is developing lot of headache, then we give a base in prism. And prisms in his spectacles, the maximum what we can give is 5 prism diopter in each eye. So maximum we can give is 10. More than 10 if you have to give, then it has to be a Fresnel prism. What is Fresnel prism? Fresnel prism is a plastic stick-on prism that will have multiple small prisms of a higher value, and that causes little bit blurring of vision, but that fusion can be maintained with that. And again, it is a temporary measure till the surgery. Treatment of exotropia is surgery. All these are temporary methods till we operate. Orthoptics is again convergence exercises, but in larger it can be of help in very small angle exotropias, but in larger angle exotropia it will be of no use. When do you operate? All exotropias are not operated. So when do you operate? Especially intermittent exotropia, it is when first is age group. Age group, as in esotropia, it is less than 2 years of age. For intermittent divergent squint, it will be more than 4 years of age generally, if the control is good. So if the control is good, we do not operate at less than 4 years. Stereo acuity in intermittent divergent squint is generally well maintained. So every 3 months, 6 months, when the child is coming to our clinic, every visit we have to get the stereo acuity checked. If there is amblyopia, definitely it has, but generally intermittent divergent doesn't go to amblyopia. Generally it doesn't go. We have to operate much before that. And suppression, again, fusion is deteriorating. Earlier it was showing fusion, and at some point one eye is getting suppressed. That will come before amblyopia. So in that case, we have to operate immediately. Development of secondary convergence insufficiency and development of diplopia or asthenopia. Surgical options that we have is recession, which is again conventional hangback, hemi-hangback, adjustable. What I'll just in brief, I'll explain how we do this. Conventionally is, suppose we have to do a 7 millimeter recession of lateral rectus of both the eyes. So what we do, we disinsert the muscle and reinsert it exactly 7 millimeter from the insertion site on the sclera. That is conventional. Hangback will be that full 7 millimeter. The suture is taken at the stump itself, and we push the suture back and tie it at the stump. So the length of the suture will be 7 millimeter, and the muscle falls back. So one of the disadvantages is that because we have not fixed the muscle to the sclera, then it may move, and the actual position in which the muscle gets attached to the sclera may be less than 7 millimeter. Hemi hangback is somewhere if suppose there is a large recession, maybe 9 millimeter, and you are not able to assess the sclera, have access to the sclera there for the suture bite, you fear that you will perforate the sclera. What we can do, if it is a 9 millimeter recession, we take a scleral bite 5 millimeter from the stump, and rest 4 millimeter we pull the suture back and let the muscle hang. Chances of this muscle getting attached elsewhere is less here because the length of the suture is less. And as adjustable suture has to be done in adult patients when you are trying to adjust. If you are expecting some undercorrection or overcorrection, we give a adjustable suture, do it under general anesthesia, and when the patient is awake, that time we slightly do the cover test and slightly adjust by tying the suture knot and then close it. And similarly, resection can be done if we are operating one eye, or if we are operating, if it is a large angle, then we have to do both eye lateral rectus resection and one eye medial rectus resection. Or if it is a convergence excess type, then it is done resection. Sorry, convergence insufficiency type. And what is the normal surgeries? Most common is bilateral lateral rectus recession, which is done, or we can do a recess resect procedure, or I have not done bilateral medial rectus resection, but in convergence insufficiency type, it can be done. So this video, I'll show it separately. And this is a child with pre-op and post-op picture after squint surgery. What will be the goal of surgery? Ideal for intermittent divergent squint is slight overcorrection, so that especially in patients who have fusion potential, slight overcorrection the child will then make effort for fusion, and chances of eyes deviating out again is less. Again, one thing we have to remember that exotropia surgery is much more unpredictable than esotropia, and chances of exotropia reappearing is much higher. So what we do is a slight overcorrection, and that is the ideal. And that time initially the child may complain of double vision. We have to just reassure the parents, and within a week or 10 days that double vision goes and the child becomes orthotropic. Optimal correction is almost ortho or a slight XT can be done in a cosmetic squint surgery, which is done in adulthood, and it's not a intermittent divergent squint. And if there is a significant lateral incompetence, what we had discussed, if lateral incompetence is more than 20%, then we do undercorrection. Why? Because if we do full correction, then when the child is seeing to the sides, may have double vision, because none of the eyes are amblyopic and the child is fusing. So in lateral gaze, the alignment will not be there and the child will start having double vision. Then again, this is the approach to intermittent exotropia. We have already discussed this. And other are infantile exotropia, monofixational exotropia with hemianopia, and consecutive exotropia. That's all. And we can take questions first, or do you want to see the surgical videos first?
We can wait for some. Do you see some questions?
Let's do some questions, then we'll do the surgical videos. Any questions regarding exotropia?
Kunal, you would like to discuss with Dr. Love?
I think, sir, for PGs, For PGs, I think the classification of exotropia is very important. The 4 types of exotropia, that they have to learn it.
Yes. There is a question regarding skew deviation.
कितना देना है?
Skew deviation was a central problem, no?
Yeah. The neurological problem.
Just go through the definition exactly, but it happens in neurological problem and the pattern is different. There is a dissociated pattern.
What is tenacious proximal fusion?
Yeah, it's a like associated deviation. One eye may be up, one eye down, and generally it is an indication of a central problem. So let us go with video.
Yes, please.
Just I was going through one of my old presentation, and in this there was surgical videos of various surgeries, but unfortunately that video was in different format, so I had to change download a free converter and change it to MP4. So you will get some disturbances in the video because it was the trial part of that software. So in a strabismus surgery, all of us know it is easy, but if you don't do a neat strabismus surgery, then if you want to do a neat bloodless strabismus surgery, then it is not that easy, and it takes some time to come to that expertise level. And just few common procedures what we do in squint I will cover in this, starting from incision, then how do we hook the muscle, how do we isolate the muscle, and then these two are more or less common in all procedures, and then come to recession, resection, hang back, inferior rectus recession, transposition, and inferior oblique and one superior oblique procedure. Just bear with me for this strip that will keep on coming in the video. No, it's not there. Suppose now let's go one by one. See from here. If we when we give incision in a squint surgery, there are two types of incision. One is called fornix base and second is called limbal base. What we do is exactly opposite of what we tell. If it is a fornix base, then incision has to be given at the limbus, and depending on medial rectus, lateral rectus, whatever you are doing, just give a few relaxing cuts. And if it is a fornix base, if it is a limbal base, we give it just over the belly of the limbus, away from the at the belly of the muscle, away from the limbus, and try to open it and hook the muscle from there. So depends on surgeon's preference, but again important is important is when we are doing resurgery. When we are doing resurgery, what incision will be given? Can anyone tell? When we are doing resurgery, we do a fornix limbal-based incision. Fornix-based incision, because the structures are not very clear, so the incision has to be at the limbus only, and then slowly we keep on dissecting, and then finally we get to the. It's not playing. And next will be a hooking and isolation. So when we are how do we hook? And this is the point where maximum bleeding occurs. Maximum bleeding will occur during hooking and before hooking, that isolation of the muscle. If we are not in the right plane and if we damage the muscle belly, then chances of bleeding is very high, and believe me, it becomes difficult. It becomes very difficult to control these surgeries. So once the incision is given, we go with the scissor. Scissor is closed, go inside, open it, and you should be able to see the sclera, both superior and inferior to the muscle in case of horizontal muscles. Then using a plain hook, first hook the muscle, and both the poles should be visible. And the hook has to be brought out by dissect the tenons, both superior and inferior, and over the muscle belly. Take very good precaution that you don't damage the blood vessels which are visible so clearly. And then it is a very neat bloodless surgery. So this is how we hook it. Okay. Then next would come recession. So in recession, what do we do? We weaken the muscle. So while weakening, we have to disinsert the muscle from its insertion and then reinsert it behind at a level calculated by us. And that can be anything for medial rectors between 3 to 6.5, 7. But generally, we don't go beyond 6. And for lateral rectors, up to 9 millimeter. So that measurement has to be taken using calipers, and we have to be very careful that the horizontal alignment from muscle stump is proper. And taking the knot, there are two ways you can take it. If it is a double-ended, we need not cut it from in between and do two interlocking incisions on both the sides. And when you are taking the scleral bite, you have to be very careful, because this is one of the dreaded complication of squint surgery, which is scleral perforation. So when we are taking bite, the needle should be visible to us in between the scleral fibers always. That is one important thing. Second, don't make it too superficial bite, because then you will end up taking a bite over the episclera, and eventually the muscle will slip in the post-op period and lead to a large overcorrection. So, and depending on what incision you have taken, this was a limbal based incision, so its sclera was sutured there. Then comes resection. Resection, what we do, we strengthen the muscle. So once, that means we shorten the muscle. So after the initial incision, hooking, that has already been demonstrated. Here what we do is we take two hooks. One is at the insertion and other is at the other side of the muscle belly, and then the length of the muscle is exposed. We do a measurement and do some marking. It can be with pen or with a blue pen, or with a cautery or dye, whatever we choose. and then make two bites in the muscle. First bite is always a partial thickness bite in the muscle, and second bite is full thickness, and then tie the belly. Two knots are there. Once this is done, muscle has been secured, then we clamp it with the artery forceps so that bleeding doesn't occur when we are cutting the muscle belly. And one, it is cut and that small segment is removed, and the remaining part of the muscle is again sutured back to the original stump. And again, here we have to be careful that muscles should not be hanging back, and it should be sutured properly, because then the desired result will not be there. There will be some amount of recession there. So that we should not do. Sometimes take a third bite from the belly and bring it again back to the stump so that it is very securely tightened there. And finally, this was a fornix based incision, so conjunctival sutures, just one suture does on both ends will be enough. And then the common part what we do is, this is the hangback procedure what I was telling. In hangback is one form of recession. So what we do in this case, the bite is taken at the insert with the stump, and you leave the thread, the long thread, based on the amount of measurement you have taken. See, if you can see, this is a large recession, maybe 10 millimeters, and then we don't have that space available to take the scleral bite. So we have done a hangback procedure here. So it's secured properly, and then we tie it, and then remove the Alabama forceps which has been used to hold the suture. And pull it back and bring it to the desired place. This is the problem. You have left the muscle belly mobile, so every time it may not get adhere to the sclera at our desired point. Now next will be the inferior oblique weakening. Inferior oblique weakening procedures again are 2-3 types. One is myectomy. That was old school of thought. What we used to do,
oral fornix incision is made about 8 to 9 millimeters from the limbus. If needed, the lateral rectus were the globe.
What we used to do was that we hook, and hooking is different from other muscles. That is another important thing in inferior oblique. Inferior oblique muscle is adherent to the conjunctiva, so our direction of the hook will be different in this case. We go from down and up towards the conjunctiva to hook the inferior oblique, and care has to be taken that we have not taken the inferior rectus and lateral rectus. So after hooking the inferior oblique, we have to check the inferior rectus and lateral rectus separately, and then cut the oblique muscle. And once the muscle is cut and sutured, where do we reinsert it? We reinsert it lateral and little bit posterior to the inferior rectus insertion. So that is inferior oblique recession. And myectomy, we just cut the belly, cauterize it, and leave it like that. So, but the problem with myectomy is that if you want to reapproach the inferior oblique, you may not be able to find it. So that is why most of us have given up myectomy. And third is anterior transposition of inferior oblique, which is done, yesterday we had discussed. It is done in DVT with inferior oblique overaction. So we need a much stronger weakening procedure. It weakens much more than the inferior oblique recession. So in that, it is little bit anterior to the inferior rectus insertion. We anchor it. And this is the myectomy in which both ends are artery forceps are used. A segment is cut on both sides and cauterized and is left to fall back. This is the third procedure what we do in inferior oblique. Now coming to superior oblique. And one more video after this. So when do we weaken the superior oblique is when we get a phenomena. If there is a phenomena, we do weakening procedure of the superior oblique. And what is important, we should know how to approach the muscle. So in the incision is in the slightly superior lateral quadrant. First we hook the superior rectus, and after hooking the superior rectus, superior oblique comes below the superior rectus in a oblique fashion. So here what you see is a very shiny superior oblique tendon. So once you have hooked it, then the posterior fibers, you have to weaken it. So the anterior fibers are left. Why is it left? Because we want the torsion to be there. Otherwise, the torsional movement will go. And the posterior fibers are cut and one segment is removed. So that this is one of the superior oblique weakening procedure. Second is superior oblique tuck, what we do for Brown syndrome. So these two procedures on superior oblique we should be aware of. And finally, the transposition. Transposition, what we had discussed the other day, that is, it can be again full thickness or partial thickness. In this case, it is a full thickness transposition. Very old video. I'm not very sure that what all muscles are involved in this. But if it is done, either it is done for a superior, like a double elevator palsy, or if there is a lateral rectus palsy, we do a transposition surgery. So what is done? The original muscle is hooked and the two adjoining, suppose in this case it looks like it's being done for a double elevator palsy. So the lateral and medial rectus are cut and then they are inserted back in between the lateral rectus insertion and the superior rectus insertion, so that some vertical movement also comes when these muscles act. And another important part in squint surgery, what we should know is horizontal muscles. We should not operate 3 muscles at a time because that may lead to anterior segment ischemia. So, and especially in older population. In older population, if we are doing squint surgery, 3 horizontal muscles should not be done. Yeah. Any questions? Any questions? So no questions today.
I think many of the questions have already been answered through the week. Entire week on Squint was exhaustive, and you have dealt with it so nicely in
Wind it
detail.
up, Dr. Satyajit.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Dr. Love, can you hear me? How come Manish can hear me and Love cannot hear me?
Voice is not there.
Yes, sir. Your voice is coming, sir.
One question they are asking.
Sorry. Now my voice was that volume was in mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, you have dealt with the entire topic so nicely over a period of 1 week, an exhaustive theory classes on Squint, which is why now the many questions are not there. We have already, if you add up all the questions, we had about 100 questions through the week, and which is why all are already answered. We are very grateful to you for the nice presentation that you made today, and also for the extra effort you made to show the videos also. Kunal, you have something to add today?
The PGs were asking what is the difference between true divergence and the pseudo divergence, which I think Love sir had already told them in the presentation.
Good. So this classes on Squint we will be winding up tomorrow. And tomorrow there will be class on special types of strabismus, and also there will be a very special class on orthoptics and basics of vision therapy, which Dr. Love Coach Gave has gone an extra mile to arrange for that presentation. Dr. Love, you would like to give a prelude to it?
Yeah, yesterday, one of you were asking about orthoptic assessment. So orthoptic assessment is mainly done by optometrists there in our place. So we have a very good optometrist who has been trained in LV Prasad Eye Institute and does orthoptic evaluation at our place. So after my presentation, she will give just a brief presentation of what is done in orthoptic evaluation. And in vision therapy, what all cases we do vision therapy, and we can have a discussion regarding it. The presentation will be short. We can have a discussion about it after that.
And also let me know how much salary you are paying her so that we can hijack her. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Love. Thank you, Kunal. Dr. Kunal, and thank you, Maniji. Thank you, Dr. Shashikant Sharma. Thank you, Intas, for this beautiful evening. I hope postgraduates have benefited a lot. Next week, from Monday to Friday, we will be having classes on retina, after which there will be 1 week of glaucoma, and then again we'll go back to retina, so that retina doesn't become monotonous. So next week, from Monday, we will be starting the applied anatomy of retina and vitreous. So you can let your friends know. And tomorrow we'll be winding up the strabismus classes. Thank you so much, Dr. Love. Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, Inta.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kunal. Thank you, Dr. Love, sir.